The rain was relentless, beating against the windows like impatient ghosts. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a growl from the depths of the storm. I sat alone in my dimly lit cottage, the flickering candlelight casting dancing shadows on the walls. The power had gone out hours ago, leaving me isolated in the heart of the tempest. I had always found solace in the rain, the rhythmic patter soothing my soul. But tonight was different. There was a tension in the air, a feeling that something was about to happen. I couldn't shake the unease that gnawed at me, like a rat nibbling at the edges of my sanity. As I huddled on the couch, trying to distract myself with a book, I heard a faint scratching sound at the door. My heart skipped a beat, and I strained my ears to listen. The scratching continued, slow and deliberate, like the bony fingers of a long-dead specter tracing patterns on the wood. I cautiously got up and crept towards the door, my footsteps muffled by the plush carpet. The scratching grew louder, more insistent, as if whatever was on the other side was desperate to get in. With a trembling hand, I reached for the doorknob, my breath catching in my throat. The moment I turned the knob, the wind howled into the cottage, bringing with it a gust of wet leaves and the earthy smell of the soaked woods. But there was something else, something far more sinister, carried on the wind, a faint whisper that echoed in my ears, just beyond the threshold of comprehension. "Let me in." The words were a mere breath, a ghostly exhalation that sent shivers down my spine. I slammed the door shut, my heart racing as I backed away. The cottage seemed to close in on me, its walls suddenly suffocating. I needed to leave, to escape the suffocating grip of whatever was lurking outside. I grabbed my coat and dashed towards the front door, my fingers fumbling with the locks in my haste. Just as I managed to unlock the door, a bone-chilling gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing the candles and plunging the cottage into darkness. Panic gripped me as I stumbled into the black void, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear the whispers now, a cacophony of voices that seemed to come from all directions. They murmured in a language I couldn't understand, their tone both pleading and threatening. The darkness pressed against me, as if it were a living entity, seeping into my very being and filling me with a paralyzing dread. In the distance, I saw a faint glimmer of light. It was the moon, obscured by thick clouds but still fighting to cast its pale glow upon the world. I stumbled towards it, my feet sinking into the wet ground with each step. The voices grew louder, their words echoing in my head like a maddening chant. "Stay with us." The light of the moon seemed to repel the darkness, creating a small sanctuary in its midst. I reached the edge of the moonlit circle and turned to look back at the cottage. It was as if the darkness had taken on a physical form, a writhing mass that engulfed the structure entirely. And then, from the heart of the darkness, emerged a figure. It was a woman, her hair drenched and clinging to her pale face. Her eyes were empty voids, devoid of life or emotion. She reached out to me with long, skeletal fingers, her voice a hollow whisper that cut through the clamor of the other voices. "Stay. Forever." I stumbled back, the fear coursing through my veins like poison. With every ounce of strength left in me, I turned away from the cottage, away from the woman, and ran towards the moonlight. The voices pursued me, their intensity growing as if angered by my defiance. I ran until my lungs burned, until the world around me began to blur. And then, suddenly, I burst through the tree-line and found myself on the edge of a cliff. The storm still raged, but the rain felt cleansing now, washing away the taint of darkness that clung to me. I stood there, my chest heaving, and watched as the first light of dawn began to break through the clouds. The voices faded, carried away by the winds of the retreating storm. The world was quiet once more, and the sun's rays warmed my skin. As the first golden beams of morning touched my face, I knew that I had escaped the clutches of whatever malevolent force had tried to claim me. But the memory of that night would forever be etched into my mind, a reminder that even in the most peaceful of places, darkness could lurk just beyond the corners of our perception. The old mansion stood atop the hill like a shadow from another time. Its towering spires and ivy-covered walls exuded an air of mystery that sent shivers down my spine. I had heard tales of its haunted history, of the tragedies that had befallen those who had dared to enter. But I was drawn to it, like a moth to a flame, unable to resist the allure of the unknown. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows, I found myself standing at the mansion's wrought iron gates. The air was thick with anticipation, and a sense of foreboding settled over me. With a deep breath, I pushed open the gate and stepped onto the cobblestone path that led to the mansion's grand entrance. The door creaked open as if welcoming me, and a chill raced down my spine. The interior was as grand as the exterior, though time had not been kind. Dusty chandeliers hung from the ceiling, their crystals glinting in the faint light. Faded tapestries adorned the walls, telling stories of a bygone era. The air was heavy with the musty scent of neglect. I ventured deeper into the mansion, my footsteps echoing through the silent halls. It was as if the very walls held their breath, watching my every move. A cold breeze brushed against my cheek, and I shivered, despite my attempts to convince myself that it was just a draft. As I entered a room that appeared to be a library, my eyes widened in awe. Countless shelves lined the walls, filled with books that had surely witnessed centuries of secrets. I reached out to touch a leather-bound tome, and as my fingers brushed against its spine, a whisper seemed to float through the air. "Find me." I spun around, my heart racing, but the room was empty save for me and the books. I shook my head, attributing the voice to my overactive imagination. Yet, a lingering unease settled in my chest. Hours seemed to blur as I explored the mansion's many rooms. Some were locked, their mysteries tantalizingly out of reach. Others were open to the elements, their grandeur faded by time. And all the while, that feeling of being watched persisted, like invisible eyes following my every step. As midnight approached, I found myself in a room that sent a shiver down my spine like no other. The walls were adorned with portraits, their subjects staring out with solemn expressions. But it was one portrait in particular that drew my attention, an elegant woman with jet black hair and piercing blue eyes. Her gaze seemed to follow me, and a name formed in my mind as if whispered by the wind, Lady Genevieve. "Help me!" The wind seemed to sigh, carrying the words through the cracks in the walls. I tore my gaze from the portrait, my heart pounding. The mansion was alive with voices, with stories longing to be told. Determination fueled my steps as I retraced my path, determined to uncover the secrets that had remained hidden for so long. In a forgotten corner of the mansion, I discovered a door that led to a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air grew colder with each step, and a faint, bluish light beckoned from below. The staircase seemed endless, as if it descended into the very depths of the earth. Finally, my foot touched solid ground, and I found myself in a chamber unlike any other. The walls were adorned with symbols and markings, illuminated by an otherworldly glow. At the center of the room lay a pedestal, upon which rested an ornate key. It seemed to pulse with an energy of its own, resonating with the stories and memories of generations past. With a trembling hand, I picked up the key and felt a rush of emotions flood over me. Memories, not my own, filled my mind: love, loss, betrayal. Lady Genevieve's story unfolded before me, a tragic tale of a forbidden love that had led to her untimely demise. "You found me!" A whisper echoed in the chamber, the voice soft yet laden with gratitude. Tears welled in my eyes as I finally understood. Lady Genevieve's spirit had been trapped, her story left untold, her soul restless. The mansion had called out to me, a living bridge between the past and the present, entreating me to uncover the truth. As the first light of dawn broke through the windows, the mansion seemed to sigh, its ancient walls releasing their hold on the past. The air felt lighter, and the voices that had haunted me had finally found their peace. I left the mansion that morning, the weight of its history no longer a burden. The sun bathed the landscape in golden light, and I knew that Lady Genevieve's story would no longer be forgotten. The mansion stood behind me, a silent sentinel, its mysteries revealed, its hauntings laid to rest. And as I walked away, I couldn't help but glance back one last time, knowing that I had been a part of something extraordinary, something both eerie and beautiful, that transcended the bounds of time itself. The moon hung high in the velvety sky, its pale light casting elongated shadows across the desolate landscape. I stood alone at the edge of the woods, the whispering leaves and distant hoots of owls creating an eerie symphony that sent shivers down my spine. There was something about this place, something that defied reason and tugged at the primal instincts buried deep within. I had come to the small, forgotten village of Blackwood, drawn by tales of a legend that had haunted the region for generations. The legend spoke of a creature, neither alive nor dead, a being that had transcended the boundaries of mortality. They called it the Eternal Apparition, a name that carried both dread and fascination. The locals spoke of strange occurrences, disappearing livestock, unexplained noises in the night, and a pervading sense of unease that lingered in the air. As a journalist with a penchant for the unusual, I couldn't resist the allure of unraveling this mystery, of getting to the heart of what lay beyond the realm of our understanding. I had rented a small cottage on the outskirts of the village, its time-worn exterior a reflection of the history that clung to Blackwood. The walls whispered stories of generations long past, and the creaking floors seemed to groan with secrets. The first night was restless, the wind outside carrying with it a mournful wail that seemed to echo the village's own sense of loss. With each passing day, I delved deeper into the village's history, poring over old records and interviewing the elderly inhabitants who were willing to share their tales. The name, Eternal Apparition, came up repeatedly, often spoken in hushed tones, as if uttering it aloud would invite its presence. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the shadows grew long, I found myself standing at the edge of the village cemetery. The tombstones stood like sentinels, their inscriptions weathered by time. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, and a chill settled in the air that had nothing to do with the fading light. I walked among the graves, my fingers tracing the names etched into the stones. And then I saw it, an old mausoleum, its iron gates slightly ajar, as if beckoning me to enter. The stories I had heard flashed through my mind, but curiosity outweighed caution. The interior was dimly lit, the moon's rays filtering through stained glass windows and casting a kaleidoscope of colors on the floor. Cobwebs adorned the corners, and the air was heavy with the scent of decay. And there, in the center of the mausoleum, was an ornate sarcophagus, its lids slightly askew. I approached it cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. I reached out and pushed the lid open, revealing the interior. My breath caught as I stared at the skeletal remains within. It was as if time had frozen, as if the figure within had been trapped in a perpetual state of unrest. And then, with a sudden jolt, the figure moved. The bones shifted, the empty sockets of its eyes fixating on me. A chill ran down my spine, and a voice echoed in my mind, neither spoken nor heard but felt deep within my consciousness. "Why do you disturb my slumber?" I stumbled back, my mind racing. This couldn't be real, it was impossible. Yet, the figure continued to move, its bony fingers reaching out towards me, its voice a mere whisper that reverberated through the mausoleum. "Tell my story." The plea was desperate, laden with centuries of isolation and longing. The words seemed to echo the sentiment of an existence that had transcended time itself, an existence of neither life nor death. The figure rose from the sarcophagus, its form ethereal and translucent. It moved towards me, its footsteps echoing like the tolling of a distant bell. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized that I stood before the very legend I had come to uncover. With every ounce of courage I could muster, I began to speak, recounting the tales I had heard, the stories of the village, and the suffering that had led to the legend's birth. The figure listened, its eyes hollow yet filled with a depth of emotion I couldn't comprehend. As I finished speaking, the figure's form began to waver, its translucence growing more pronounced. And then, with a final whisper that echoed in the chamber, it dissipated into the air, leaving behind an emptiness that matched the void of its existence. I stood there, breathless and trembling, the weight of what I had witnessed settling upon me. The legend of the eternal apparition had been real, and I had been chosen to bear witness to its torment, to share its story with the world. As I left the mausoleum and walked back towards the village, I couldn't shake the feeling that the figure's presence lingered, a bittersweet reminder that some mysteries are meant to be uncovered, some stories meant to be told, even if they exist in the liminal space between reality and the unknown. And as I looked back at the mausoleum one last time, I couldn't help but wonder if the figure had finally found the peace it had sought for so long, or if it continued to wander, a perpetual enigma in the tapestry of time.